Alright, I think it's time for another tier list. Today we're gonna be ranking everything and seeing what is good, what it's not, what should you play, what should you avoid. I've added all of the decks that I feel like it's worth talking about, and I also included some of the newly supported decks just to cover them as well. Starting off, we have Branded. Now I think that Branded is still a nice deck, but it's not anywhere near top tier. In my eyes, it's not really performing as great as some of the other options. So I think that this deck can be a nice rogue option, but it's not above that. I still think it can perform pretty nicely though. Next up, we've got one of the newer decks, Lightsworn. Now I think Lightsworn are pretty good. Depending on what version you play, you're gonna see either better or slightly worse results. I feel like the best version is gonna be Lightsworn with Tier, right? Tier is just the best deck to play paired with Lightsworn. Also with the Horus engine and stuff like that. There is also a 40 card build for Lightsworn. I don't think that the 40 card build is better than the 60 card, considering the fact that you have a couple of breaks that you just don't want to draw in your opening hand, right? And I will rank it as another rogue option. I think that it's better than Branded in my opinion, because grass is just crazy. Like if you resolve grass, you win a lot of those games, so you can focus on playing grass. You gotta get the mills going a little bit, but it definitely has potential and I do like it. I've play tested it a lot. I have a whole bunch of videos about Lightsworn, so I definitely know what I'm talking about. I have a lot of wins with this deck, so I definitely believe in it. And next up we have Labrynth. Now Labrynth is a very interesting option. I do think that it's actually a good deck. I'll put it at tier 3. The reason why is because I think it's one of the better decks to play against Tenpai with, and the trap cards can affect your opponent pretty well. Like it literally just one Daruma Karma can be pretty important against something like Tenpai, or you can play some sort of a popping effect or removal effect, so you can get rid of the Sangen summoning, flip stuff face down. You have a bunch of options not only against Tenpai but also against Fire King, Snake Eye, Yubel, and all those other top tier decks. I think that Labrynth still has a good spot in the meta because traps are a little bit harder to deal with, and they're pretty good because they cannot be negated as easily. People don't really play that many spell or trap card negates, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later and why I think this is important for the meta. Next up we have plants. Now plants are interesting. They received a lot of new support. I tried it out. Actually I managed to learn this deck somehow. It's actually a pretty cool deck. The plant power is pretty good in general. It has been performing really well on tournaments and stuff like that. Now do I think it's anywhere near tier 1, tier 2? Nah, it's not obviously, but it's pretty good tier 3 option maybe, because you know the new support made it slightly better. You can definitely play through interruptions. You have a lot of 1 and 2 card combos that you can do with this deck, and you can definitely go crazy with it to the point where your opponent cannot really do anything. And the reason why I think that plants are a good tier 3 deck to actually try out and play is because they end on Hyperiton the majority of times, which is a spell or trap card negation. This is important, at least in my opinion. Spell or trap card negations are gonna be really interesting and really important in my opinion, and that's why I'm putting some emphasis on that, but I'm gonna talk about it later when I discuss the reason why they can be pretty good. For now though, I think plants are a nice tier 3 option because they have a lot of new support, they have a lot of different things they can do, and the combos are just crazy. A lot of people actually don't know when to interrupt this deck, so that's also an important thing, and yeah, in my opinion it's a good deck. Alright, next up we've got Tenpai Dragon at home. Ancient Gear is a pretty interesting deck. I think that it's a good deck. It's not a bad deck, it's just that it's not something that you can definitely opt to play, because going second you're not really gonna play Ancient Gear. You'd much rather play Tenpai Dragon. I think that you can play this deck, but only if you're a fan of it. It's an off meta pick that can be pretty decent, but you're just gonna play Tenpai Dragon if you wanna play going second build and win games, right? Like there's no point playing Ancient Gear except if you like the anime and stuff. Next up we're gonna talk about tier that received a big hit. The field spell is now banned. Does that mean that the deck is not good anymore? Absolutely not. It's still a tier 3 option yet. The nerf is significant enough because you're not gonna be able to play the Crystal Beast engine, and some of the other cards are not gonna be that good anymore in the deck, but there's still space in the meta for this deck. Grass is an incredibly strong card that can definitely make your plays a lot better with this. If you resolve grass, you still win the game, right? So it's still a good deck. The field spell does hurt it quite a bit because you cannot search some of your important cards. That doesn't mean that the deck is done. It still has the other engine pieces that you can use, and it has some really good tech cards that can improve the deck's consistency and stuff. So yeah, I still think that Tearlaments is a pretty good option. Okay, now we have one of the more interesting decks in my opinion. Centur-Ion is a deck that I actually fell in love with recently. I think that the deck is pretty good, dude. I don't know why people think that this deck is not that great. In my eyes, it is actually really strong, and it has been performing really well against a lot of decks. It is super consistent. You can include a lot of non-engine. It has all of the necessary tools to be a top tier deck, and I believe that this deck is actually really strong because of that. Pure consistency is just incredibly strong on its own. Blizzard Dragon is one of the strongest negates in the game, and I think this is pretty important that this deck can get access to it really easily. You can negate a summon, you can negate anything, and that's really important, dude. So this is gonna be a little bit of a hot take, but I think that this deck has potential of being even a tier 2 deck, and this is something that I'm not sure 100% is the case, but I've seen this deck having large success. I've played specifically Yubel and Tenpai against this deck a lot, and the deck has been performing really well. I consider it being a really strong option in this meta. Now putting it tier 2 is a little risky because high tier 3 is definitely where the deck currently stands, but I think it has potential to be a tier 2 option, so I'm gonna gonna leave it here. It's my hot take. If you don't agree with it, it's fine. Moving on, we have Rescue Ace. Rescue Ace has been sticking to the tier 3 category, and I still think it's the same thing. The deck is good, the deck is consistent, it performs well. It is nothing too incredible, nothing has changed, nothing has been limited, banned, or whatever. So the power level of the deck does remain the same. The deck's performance pretty good overall. It has a lot of space for non-engine, and you also play one of the stronger engines in the game, being the Snake Eye engine, and it's definitely a good option still in the meta. Alright, now I'm gonna talk about Thunder Dragon real quick. The reason why I put this deck here is because Colossus got unlimited, which is actually, in my opinion, a small change that makes the deck a lot better overall. It's still an off-meta pick, don't get me wrong, but the Colossus being up to 3 means that you can spam more than one Colossus on the field, and this can get ridiculously difficult to deal with for your opponent. I've actually lost numerous games against this deck when they set up multiple Colossus and I don't have something like a Droplet or Super Poly, and against decks that cannot play around it, especially Tenpai Dragon, it can be a pretty nasty card to deal with because you're gonna have to negate 2 of them, and this is not an easy thing. I think that Thunder Dragon can be an interesting option because you can spam those Colossus. If there's any Thunder Dragon player, let me know in the comments below, please, what your performance has been post ban list. I'm very interested to learn more about it. Alright, now we have Mathmech. I think this is a pretty good deck because it has a spell or trap card negation, by the way, and this, in my opinion, is pretty important to stop something like Sangen Summoning. Also, it's really hard to interrupt Cyber's plays. You can definitely set up something even through interruption, so that's also important. Overall, pretty good deck. Moving on, we have Purrely. Now, Purrely is an interesting deck. I'm not sure whether I should put it as a rogue tier or tier 3 option. Maybe tier 3 is the way to go, but I haven't played the deck that much, so my opinion is not the most accurate. Let me know what you think about this one. I think that tier 3 is still a fine option, so I'm gonna leave it there for now. Now we have Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul is an off-meta pick. I don't think it's anything above that. The deck has fallen off significantly. Almost no one plays this deck, and it's for a reason. It just doesn't have the tools necessary to compete with the other decks, in my opinion. Not that the deck is bad, it's just that it's not as great as it used to be. Next up, we have Bystial Runick. This is an interesting one. I think this is a nice rogue deck. I've seen it perform pretty well. If you're a good pilot with this deck, I think you can have some pretty great results with it. Alright, moving on, we have one of the newly supported decks. Infernoid is a pretty nice deck. The new support definitely makes the deck a lot better. It is still an off-meta pick, obviously, but I wanted to talk about it because it's a pretty cool deck you can try out. The new fusion monster is really important because now you can set up your whole graveyard with just one card. Also, reasoning is at 3, which is really important, and grass is available as well, so you can build your deck around playing those cards and definitely see some wins. Next up, we've got Snake Eye. Now, this deck is absolutely off meta. Don't play this. By the way, this is by far one of the worst decks to play. The consistency is horrible and you shouldn't play it. Just play Fire King Snake Eye instead. It's a lot better. I just wanted to include it so I can tell you not to play this. This is the only reason why this deck is here. Alright, now we have a really interesting deck, and the deck has gone up to rogue tier, in my opinion. I think it has some small potential for tier 3, but for now I'm gonna put it at rogue tier because, in my opinion, it is not as easy to combo off with it as some of the other decks. It is a little easier to negate the deck and stop their place with some hand traps, which I don't really love. However, this shifter is still a big deal. If you resolve this shifter, it's gonna be a pretty good scenario for you. And of course, if you combo off, you're gonna have a pretty strong board to win a lot of your games with. However, it's a little difficult to pilot, and you really gotta know how to play it to get the best out of it. But still, with the newly released Lara together with the Fusion and Link Monster, I definitely see this deck being a lot more competitive than it used to be. I'm not gonna be surprised if the deck goes up to tier 3. We'll see what will happen. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe tier 3 is the better option for it. For now, I'm gonna leave it as a rogue tier though, because I'm not sure how good the deck can be. And next up, we got Voiceless Voice. Now, Voiceless Voice is a nice tier 3 deck. You probably expected this already. It's pretty good in terms of consistency. It has some nice plays. You can definitely fit in a lot of non-engine. For those reasons, I think that the deck belongs to tier 3. And now moving on to the big 3. What do I think of them? Obviously, all of them are tier 1 still. Yubel is by far the worst in the 3 of them, in my opinion. You probably didn't expect to hear that, but in my opinion, the deck is the worst out of the 3 because of consistency. I would rather play Centur-Ion, by the way, compared to Yubel. Not even gonna lie to you, but I still think that when you combo off, you combo off like crazy, and the deck is still tier 1. Especially with the new Fiendsmith support, this deck is gonna go crazy, so yeah, it's still gonna be a tier 1 option. Moving on, Fire King Snake Eye, same thing, it's still a tier 1 option. The nerfs weren't that significant. Popular to 1 doesn't mean that much, so the deck is still gonna be pretty powerful. You're still gonna see it a lot, and it's gonna perform really well. Clearly no changes here. These are gonna remain the best options, but now let's talk about Tenpai Dragon. A lot of people want to know how good this deck can be. Some people think that it's the new best deck. Others think that this deck is actually capped and it's not even that great. But my opinion is, drumroll, I think this is the new best deck in the game. That's right, I said it. The deck is better than Fire King Snake Eye and Yubel, in my opinion, without the Fiendsmith support. Once the Fiendsmith support comes out, these two are gonna become better than Tenpai Dragon. But for now, Tenpai Dragon is the only deck that hasn't had any consistency hits except for the Sangen Summoning, compared to Yubel, which is really not that consistent, and Fire King Snake Eye, which is not that bad of an option, but still got some consistency hits as well. Also, one more important reason why I believe Tenpai Dragon to be the best deck. It is actually really difficult to negate spells or traps in the current meta, and a lot of the decks can do that. That's why I emphasized a lot on the spells and trap cards, because if Sanguine Summoning resolves, chances are you're gonna lose the game, especially with the fact that this deck has the most space for non-engine as well, and it has the best one-card combos right now. I think that the best way to compete with this deck is if you have a way to remove the Sanguine Summoning. This is one of the most important things, because if they end up hard drawing it and they don't use something like Paijuwa to search it, you're gonna have a lot of trouble dealing with it from there. So that's why I think something like IP into SP is gonna be a really good combo for Firekick, Snake Eye, and Yubel to deal with the field spell like that, since they don't have access to other tools to deal with the field spell that easily. I mean, you can technically play the Caesar for Yubel and solve that problem, but it's not the most optimal deck list, so I don't think it's an option really. However, decks that can play some spare trap card negation like Centur-Ion with the Blazer Dragon, Mathmech with the Deceive Worm, and the Low with the School Guardian are gonna be really strong in my opinion. Of course, this is just my opinion. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Also, check out more Yu-Gi-Oh! Must Do content in the channel, and like and subscribe will be greatly appreciated and really helpful. As always, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.